Okay, Elizabeth, let's go forward and let's begin introductions. Hi, my name's Anita Harriet. I'm the president of the Fine Art Group, and I will be beginning this presentation today. And then Elena, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon and good morning to everyone. I'm Elena Racheva. I'm one of the art advisor directors at the Fine Art Group, and I'm based in New York. And I'm looking forward to going over the exciting season coming up in New York.
And Morgan.
Hi, I'm Morgan Schoenhoven. Good morning from Los Angeles. I am also one of the art advisors here at the group. My background is Impressionist and modern art. So looking forward to talking about the sales.
Thanks so much, Morgan. Carrie, off to you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Carrie Jeffrey. I'm a Senior Director of Advisory and Agency here at the Fine Art Group and have a generalist background, but a love of rare books, maps, manuscripts, and decorative arts. And I work with our clients with alternative assets.
Thank you. Kim.
Hi, everybody. My name's Kim Hong. I am based in Denver, Colorado, and I focus on post-war and contemporary. Thanks.
Thank you. And Jana.
Hello, my name is Jana Terzakarian. I am based here in our New York offices. I work with the entire advisory team, and I focus on contemporary and young contemporary art.
Yes, and I'm in California. Next, please. Okay, so just very quickly about the Fine Art Group, in case any of you are new to our firm. We are a global firm. We are a London-based firm. I run US, as I mentioned before. We also have a very strong presence in Hong Kong and Dubai, in Brussels. And our focus is primarily helping clients manage the entire art ecosystem. And when I say art, I mean art with a big A. All of our clients' tangible assets of value. We have been in existence for over 20 years. We are in our DNA, our very DNA is investment. So when we work with clients, we focus very heavily on making sure they understand everything about the artwork that they are buying and understanding its place as an asset, part of their asset portfolio. Can you go to the next one, please? So a little bit about how our firm works. We have 5 fully vertically integrated services within our firm. We have over 47 full-time staff and 50 experts that we bring in for a variety of purposes. And then within our verticals, we have a very large appraisals division, assisting clients with understanding value, which we think is the basis of all decisions around your art collections. We have an art advisory division, and here are some of our best art advisors, but we have a very large team in the UK, Hong Kong, and the United States. And our job is to make sure we provide clients with information. We like to say no more than yes. We like to do a lot of due diligence and analysis, which we'll discuss further in this conversation today. We have a sales agency business in which we assist clients when they're coming up with strategies for sale. So we are independent. We represent the client. We bring in a full team to assist with that strategy and determining what is the best venue, and then making sure that wherever we decide to place that sale, everyone does exactly what they're supposed to do to maximize revenue. We have an art finance division, so clients who want to use their art, jewelry, or watches as collateral for liquidity. We can assist with an asset-only specialty asset lending practice. And then, as I mentioned, our very DNA is art investment. We developed over 20 years the first art fund, Deloitte KPMG audited fund. And we have had over 9 different kinds of structures around investment. And we are just launching our latest structure now. So we really do believe that this is an alternative asset class if it's done correctly and conservatively and intelligently. And last but not least, we do have a high profile division in which we work primarily with sports, with athletes and entertainers and people in the public eye. So we're really there to manage the entire art ecosystem. You go to the next one, Elizabeth. And now a little bit about the art market. I don't know how many of you follow the art market, but it is a booming market. And there are lots of reasons for that. Certainly, we know that one of the reasons is that these kinds of assets are seen as semi-uncorrelated to inflation. We know that many of our clients acquire them with the goal of taking money from one bucket and putting it into another. We know people want to buy art and collectibles as a way to kind of define in a nonverbal way their power. And that's a global kind of, we've seen that globally as well. We also know that looking at COVID and impact of COVID, the art boom has, the art market has rebounded dramatically. We were just interviewed today by Art News, in which they said, well, what do you think, with inflation and recession, are people still investing in art? Yes, they are. And we anticipate this to be a very, very strong auction season. Unfortunate for us as buyers, good for us as sellers. Can you go to the next one, please? Okay, Elena, take us through kind of what's been happening in the global auction sales.
Yeah, so it's been quite an interesting 3 to 4 years. As we know, 2020 was an unprecedented time in global history and in the art market specifically. And we saw logistical impediments to offering material and important artworks to market, especially in a live sale format. But very quickly, I think the art market and art market professionals were able to adapt to an online selling model. And despite the challenges of travel and moving artworks around the world, there was a huge increase in online sales. So that shift was very fast, and buyers were very welcoming to that shift. Buyers were absolutely ready to invest. To Anita's point, they were still looking to kind of diversify their portfolios and still looking to buy quality objects. But of course, look at that sort of shrink at 7.2 billion in 2020. And then as time goes on in 2021 and 2022, we see that kind of return to pre-pandemic levels. And some of the material and great material and collections coming to market that were held back kind of were then offered a year or two later onto the marketplace. That figure of 2022 at 13.8 billion contains a couple of single owner collections that alone surpassed $1 billion each, like the Paul Allen collection, for example. So just very robust and healthy environment of robust demand, and then the supply is catching up to it.
Well, and you mentioned, Elena, some of these single owner sales that were held back at the beginning of the pandemic. We basically, in looking at single owner sales, we've always had single owner sales, I think, but just not to the extent that we're seeing them right now. There was always the Elizabeth Taylors, the Yves Saint Laurent. However, now we're really seeing some of the more niche names, I think, getting the sort of single owner sale treatment. I think that has a few factors factoring into that, especially the way that the marketing can really tell a story and create a brand behind it. When we were discussing this earlier before the call, we actually, I think a lot of this also comes down to a reflection of the competition that the different houses have to sort of put forth in order to win the business to begin with. But I think this marketing and this storytelling does really go a long way. I mean, it's effective. At the end of the day, single owner sales are effective. And I think another aspect that will help us continue to see these single owner sales moving forward is actually a fourth D that goes along with the death, debt, and divorce, those 3 Ds of the auction world, but actually downsizing with this sort of the great wealth transfer that a lot of people are talking about and is happening. I think there's, in addition to death, a lot of these baby boomer collectors are starting to downsize even before death, really sort of help the next generation. Maybe they don't necessarily want to keep these works, and they can help shepherd them through sales ahead of death.
And I would also mention that, many of these single owner sales actually are going to charity. And,
Mm.
we do have a very strong philanthropic division of our company. And we do understand that not every museum can absorb this kind of supply, but
Nor should they.
nor should they. But, the sale can certainly bring those in need some financial benefit, which I think is a very interesting kind of development we're seeing more and more. Can you go to the next one, Elizabeth? Thanks, Morgan. So now we're going to get into the art itself. And what we're doing today is each of us have looked at all of the auctions, not even the big three. In addition to the big three, we've looked at Bonhams, we've looked at Heinemann, we've looked at all different auction houses. And we've basically kind of brought forth each of us a higher valued piece and a lower valued piece. I'd call it more affordable. That's in quotations. And these are pieces that we believe in. And what does that mean? What does it mean to believe in a piece? Because I said our DNA really is investment. We do think very strategically about the works that our clients buy. And when we look at art as an investable asset, art as part of your portfolio, we basically do the same kind of due diligence you would do when you're buying a piece of real estate or you're buying a business, right? One funny statement I've discussed this before is, when you buy a house, you don't just look at the house and write a check. But many clients, when they look at art, will look at a piece of art and write a check. You actually bring in a real estate appraiser. You may bring in a surveyor. You may bring in an architect, right? All of them to determine the value of the acquisition. Well, in art, it's exactly the same. So when we look at an artwork, we ask the following questions. Who is the artist? And we're going to have some nice examples of artists that are very new to the market and some artists that are tried and true, which we call blue chip artists. We're going to ask, what is the medium? What is it made of? How big is it? And we have some very small examples and some very large examples of artworks. And then just like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, some that are just right. We're going to look at the date and, to what extent is the date reflective of the moment when that artist became very important in the development of art history? What is the subject matter? We have some excellent examples of artworks in which the subject matter is that defining factor for value. The condition is something all of you usually cannot see with the naked eye. So in addition to condition reports, which may be requested above a certain threshold, we do recommend that you have either a company like ours or an independent condition report conducted for the object. We want to know who owned it, and that relates to this single owner sale question as well. How important is the provenance? Very. How rare is it to the market? Have we seen works like this come to the market before, or are they all held in museums? What's the sales history? Has the artwork ever gone unsold? In fact, is the client flipping it? Did they buy it just 3 years ago? And then kind of the more academic side, has there been literature written about this object? Have they been in important exhibitions? So we basically rate each of these categories, A, B, C, D, and F, right? And we really don't want clients acquiring pieces that are, less than a B on any of these categories, with some exception. So when you hire our firm, when we look at an artwork for you, we do that due diligence so that you understand what you're buying and what the price should be. So I think now we can actually begin looking at some art. So I'm going to start with my two top picks, and they are basically two contrasting examples. And the reason I say that is because the Rousseau painting, which is one of the featured lots in the Christie's sale, is so rare to the market. It will certainly make a world record today. Almost every one of Rousseau's paintings of the jungle theme are in museums. You can count on your hands, probably no more than 10 important examples have ever sold at auction, and very, very few examples are in private hands. So when we look at those categories of analysis, besides the fact that it's an important painting in terms of its beauty and the artist being so influential on the development of surrealism, influential for Picasso, for Kandinsky, all influenced by Rousseau, it's the rarity factor in this case that makes this a very, very important museum quality work. And the estimate obviously reflects that $20 to $30 million. Understand that an estimate is not a value. An estimate is there to gauge interest. So we will be, and this is also a guaranteed work. So it is already has an irrevocable bid. It will sell. No matter what, it will sell. On the right, in contrast to the Rousseau, in which rarity is that category of analysis that really is the determinant factor here, we have Warhol, who in fact has, probably more works on the market other than Picasso, right? Those are probably the two artists that have sold the most at auction. And that's primarily because Warhol worked in a print medium, silkscreen. But what makes this, what's the category of analysis that really determines value for this Warhol is two-part. One would be the important subject matter. And two, the fact that it is a unique work because he took a brush and he painted right on top of it. So it's acrylic and silkscreen. There is no other depiction of Mao by Warhol in the world that looks like this than this one. It is a completely original work. And for Warhol, that's extremely important. Also to note that because this is Mao, and it's 1973, right after Nixon, basically with ping pong diplomacy, opened the doors to China and to the Western world, Mao was the most duplicated image globally at the time. And Warhol wanted to look at the most popular cultural figure and to put his spin on that cultural figure, and in this case, Mao. What is interesting is that typically the Chinese buyers were very interested in Mao iconography, but we've seen a change there. So they're not as interested in acquiring depictions of Mao. So potentially this could be acquired for a good price. So thank you so much. Onward and upward. Elena.
Okay, so I picked two very different works actually, but I think they look rather beautiful together on the screen. So the Picasso on the left is a really beautiful, in my opinion, portrait of one of his partners, François Gillot. And if you know me, you'll know that Gillot is my favorite Picasso partner. She's the only woman that actually left Picasso, and she's an artist in her own right. And in fact, she's still alive and working and living today, lives in the Upper West Side in New York. I picked this work. It's coming up at Phillips. It has an irrevocable bid already, so it's guaranteed to sell. But I picked it because of its rarity, the rarity factor. Portraits of Marie-Thérèse Walter, portraits of Dora Maar come up on the market fairly frequently. And there is a great demand for those as well. In fact, right now on the marketplace across all four auction houses, there are half a dozen, if not more, substantial portraits by Picasso of Marie-Thérèse Walter and Dora Maar, several at the $15 million to $30 million range. And what's interesting with François Gillot, this is a $6 to $9 million painting of a really substantial size. The quality is incredibly high with this work, and it really makes me think how, and reminds me how important Picasso's work is for painters working today. There is George Condo that's being offered at Christie's this season from the Cy Newhouse collection, a large blue portrait. And Condo wouldn't really be painting the way he's painting today if it weren't for Picasso's seminal body of portraiture. And to me, we always think about quality in clients' collections and a thread of narrative that grounds those collections. And it's essential for me, for anyone looking at someone like George Condo to really, and Dana Schutz, of course, to really look at really important examples like this one. I think that the Gillot market, the portraits of François Gillot can reach up to the sort of the $20 million mark for sort of the most expensive ones, but this is a really beautiful lyrical example. completely fresh to market, hasn't changed hands in the last 20 years. So a great check in that box. Now the Magritte that I chose, I wanted to choose because it's such an unusual and rare and important work. Magritte is one of those artists that is really having a moment. The Mall Austin collection that's selling this season in New York has two really important examples. And Magritte's sort of world record prices have been climbing steadily. But this is a work from the 1920s. And going back to those factors that are key in determining value, the late 1920s, conceptually, in Magritte's practice were really, really important. It's a time that he really formulates this whole idea of painting as shifting the idea of painting away from representing an object and representation and towards conceptualizing an object. Right? So you have these wonderful 1920s works of This Is Not a Pipe and sort of the object paintings that are so avant-garde and so important for the development of essentially the rest of 20th century art and conceptual art. I think visually, it's a beautiful painting to behold, and it makes me think of the importance of Arp's work on Magritte, but also makes me think of someone like Constantine Brancusi, this incredibly rare sculptor, you know, practicing at the beginning of the 20th century. And it's just a very, very evocative image. I'm so curious to see how this performs. It's not an obvious iconography for Magritte, but it's an extremely important iconography. So I'm watching this carefully. And just one more note to say that with Magritte, there's been so much interest in his work because ultimately for a lot of contemporary artists working today, figuration and meaning and teasing out substance and teasing out imaginary worlds is very important. I think collectors are very interested in that in today's environment. And that kind of cuts right through to surrealist masters from 100 years ago and their contributions to art history. Over to the next slide.
That was great, Ellie. So I chose two works at very opposite ends of the spectrum. The first one is this beautiful Klimt that's going to be offered at Sotheby's. It is estimate upon request, but they've said in the region or in excess of 45 million, which it will definitely sell, again, because it does carry an irrevocable bid. However, given sort of the recent performance of the Paul Allen birch forest scene that was sold last year for 104 million. I think the work is in very good company. And I think actually when I first saw it on my screen, I think I was really drawn to it because we had just recently been looking very closely at Hockney and the way Hockney and other artists throughout history have approached depictions of water. And I think this is such a beautiful example of a very early, sort of approach to it, one that feels so modern for the time period. I mean, this was, beginning of the 1900s, this sort of cropping that the artist would eventually become pretty well known for. This was one of the earliest uses of that cropping of the image, which also points to his parallel experiments with photography. So I think we really see a lot of photographic elements here. Also, the high horizon line is very much in line with late Impressionism. One thinks of Monet and his water lilies and this sort of like all-encompassing landscape. However, I guess this is a waterscape. So I'm just really excited to see this in person when I actually get to New York next week. And then on the other spectrum, or at the other end of the spectrum, is this very tiny but mighty Gertrude Abercrombie work from 1957. I actually was first introduced to the artist by a colleague because I was going and overseeing a pickup for her, a collection of works here in Los Angeles back in 2019. And one of of them was Gertrude Abercrombie self-portrait, and it was going into her mid-season sale. And we've seen sort of a upcropping of and more presence of this artist after probably it was 2018 when the gallery Karma Gallery held a solo exhibition of this artist. And prior to that, she was very well known within her regional area, which was Chicago. And now she's really been sort of spreading her wings, I guess, or you could say that Karma has been spreading her wings. We've seen a lot. I mean, this estimate is pretty on par with the secondary market, with the auction market. But comparatively, and it's interesting because I did spot that Karma is bringing one of her works, in fact, a door work, to TAFAF art fair next week. And they have an asking price of $300,000. So it's an interesting moment to sort of see this differentiation between auction estimate and retail market. I mean, her record right now at auction is $437,000, which falls squarely in line with that retail asking price. So I'll be really curious to see where this one ends up. It's actually one of 3 that are on the market right now. There's Sotheby's has one, very different depiction of an owl, and Heinemann also has one of a giraffe. So those will all be coming up in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Morgan. And Elizabeth, we can have the next slide. And so when I was looking at the sales, I mean, obviously the last couple of years, the art market's gaze has been shifted somewhat to female artists that haven't been given a lot of exposure, artists of color. And I really wanted to highlight a work that was from one of those categories. And when I was scrolling through the evening sale, I went by this and went back again, went by it and went back. And then I stopped and I was looking at it. And this wasn't a name that's an artist that I was very familiar with. This wasn't, it's in a sale with household names, with well-known artist names. And I started delving into Agnes Pelton. She was a contemporary of Georgia O'Keeffe. She studied at the Pratt Institute. Was actually taught by the same instructor as O'Keeffe. And so you can see some similarities in their works, but they're actually very, very different. They're often exhibited together. Agnes Pelton lived the majority of the second part of her life in Cathedral City in California, and she was very influenced by the desert and nature. She sees these as these are her visionary paintings from meditation. Her market is new to the secondary market. This will make a world record for her. It does have an irrevocable bid. I think it is, an important artist. The Whitney just did an exhibition on her in 2020, and most of her works are in institutions. And I'm very intrigued to see how this work is going to sell. I think that with the focus on these underexplored and underappreciated female artists from the early 20th century, I think it's just one to look at in the sale, and it's in Christie's evening sale. And then for my second pick, I wanted to sort of shift gears and sort of dip my toes into the book world. I picked John James Audubon, which, there's many, many sets of them out there. They're solid acquisitions. Anita's pick, actually, the Rousseau, he was heavily influenced by natural history illustrators like Audubon. And so there is a basis for John James Audubon and some of these other artists. I would even say Morgan's pick, Abercrombie, her naturalists, her giraffes, her owls, her birds. I mean, she was looking at some of these natural history books. Why I picked this one is it's a presentation copy inscribed by Audubon to an associate. And I have not encountered a presentation copy from Audubon. So if you're going to acquire this set, this is the top of the top in terms of like long-term investment. It sells at Hindman in their rare books, maps, and manuscripts sale. It's a very important set with that inscription, and Audubon is always going to remain important in sort of American art. Go on to Kim, I think.
Hi. So I focused a little bit similarly to Carrie, where I looked at female artists. They tend to speak to me probably because I'm a woman, but also because they're really fascinating in the market right now. I think the market is really trying to focus its attention on important figures in art history that have been sort of pushed to the sidelines. I've got two examples here that have some similarities, but also are vastly different. My most excited work is the Louise Bourgeois. It's the one I will be running to Sotheby's to look at as soon as I make it to New York. It is a massive piece, 10 feet tall by 18 feet wide. So not something that is necessarily for all types of buyers, especially when you're looking at the estimate provided, that $30 to $40 million estimate. It too, like other works that we've mentioned, has a guarantee. While we don't know, the details of the specifics behind the guarantee, it pretty much means that the Bourgeois will set a world record for the artist. The highest amount sold for one of her works, which also is a large bronze spider like this, was set in May of 2019. And it sold for just over $32 million, including all of the fees. And so it'll be very exciting to see where this one ends up. It's also being sold, to benefit a foundation in Brazil. And we've noticed, and it's something that we kind of touched on briefly, the philanthropic angle that we're seeing increasingly at auction. That also can add a little bit of extra flavor to bidding, where people are a little bit looser with their wallets when they know it's going to a good cause. And so this piece, since it is signature subject matter for the artist, huge and monumental, guaranteed, pretty much the strongest material that you could have for her work coming to sale, that most of them are held in institutional, collections. It's quite rare. And, all of these elements just make me extremely excited to see what it will do in May. The other piece that I chose is the Michaela Yearwood-Dan work. She is a contemporary artist, actually just wrapping up an exhibition at Marian Boesky that closes this week. And her works are like this, very vivid in color, incredibly happy and vibrant. This work has an estimate of $20,000 to $30,000. It's important, like Anita said before, that estimates aren't always an indication of value. So we see this a lot in the contemporary, ultra contemporary market, where things are estimated conservatively, and then there tends to be a lot of interest and also speculation sometimes, where things way outperform the estimate. So interestingly, Yearwood-Dan is a London-based artist. Her auction records previously have been in London and in Hong Kong. She sold one work in the US previously at auction. This piece is considerably smaller than most of the pieces that have sold. You can imagine these large canvases with bright color that are 70 inches by 50 inches, where you're immersed in a scene like this. This is only 18 by 14 inches. But with that being said, most of her auction records have been, kind of indicating sales within $200,000 to $300,000. Her record was a little over $880,000 for a much larger canvas, and that sold in London earlier this year. So it'll be interesting to see how this performs, because it's a much more livable size and also a signature for her work, and also from an important time period. So this is 2019, right before she gained really solid gallery representation, and that just has continued. She just was part of a group show at Gagosian, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens with her career.
Okay, moving on, I want to start with this epic Banksy on the left, which derives from a mural that appeared in London in 2017 on the walls of the Barbican Centre, which it coincided with the upcoming exhibition at the centre dedicated to Jean-Michel Basquiat, which was the first comprehensive exhibition in the UK for the artist. The current painting depicts Basquiat's iconic 1982 piece titled Boy and Dog in Johnny Pump, who has been stopped and searched by kind of traditional Banksy stencil-styled police officers. Originally, Basquiat's Boy and Dog in a Johnny Pump is a very colorful, very vibrant painting that depicts a very warm summer scene with this boy and his companion standing in the water of a Johnny Pump, which was in New York slang for an open and technically illegal fire hydrant. In Basquiat's painting, you can almost feel from that color palette the joy of this moment and the playfulness of the set in which, the playfulness of the scene in which it is being set on a very hot summer day. And Banksy in this work really responds to that. His homage to the artist consists of deliberately kind of stripping away most of that color from the scene and portraying the boy and his dog in very grayish and darkish tones. So if Basquiat's painting was all about that one moment of joy, Banksy's showing what comes after when someone calls the police. So the boy who had originally had his hands up in a very playful manner is now, it's a clear hands up gesture to the police. So yeah, as always, Banksy makes everything political. He responds to the high disproportion of Black people being stopped and searched by the police, both in the UK as well as in the United States. I'm really curious to see how this works does in auction, because it will be a really true test to his market. As you may know, Banksy reached his record price in 2021 at Sotheby's after his famous shredding stunt of the iconic girl with the balloon painting. At the time, it sold for about 25 million. And overall, he actually had a very strong year in 2021, achieving a few other records for his pieces. Since his market has been oversaturated with editions, but his paintings have been quite stable. So I'm really curious to see how well it does, because it is an important work and it's an important subject matter. It's quite a vast scale, but at the same time, that scale is so symbolic to street art, and the medium as well is very symbolic of that. And it examines very iconic relationship between two important street artists of 20th and 21st century. So really curious to see how it does. It's also a third-party guaranteed work, so it will sell. Yeah, very curious to see how it goes. Next up, I am really excited about this absolutely magnificent work by a British painter, Lynette Yadom-Boakye. She focuses on portraiture that is often set in these very dark and enigmatic settings. She says that she's much less interested in making portraits of people, and she's more interested in the act of painting itself. So she does not paint from life. None of her figures are real. They are, entirely deriving from her imagination. And because they're so intimate and so familiar that when you're in their presence, she really almost makes you believe in someone that does not really exist. And I love that quality in her work. The present work is a great example of that. It's a monumental scale that takes up kind of just enough of space around you. It has that grand feature to it where it makes you look up to it, but at the same time, it's a livable size. There's also very much like a timeless quality to her works where you have no idea when it was made. It could have been centuries ago, it could have been yesterday. Yeah, she's represented by Jack Shaman Gallery. She had a recent Tate Britain retrospective in London. She was shortlisted in 2013 for the Turner Prize, and she was included in the Ghanaian Pavilion in 2019 Venice Biennale. She currently has an exhibition at the Guggenheim Bilbao, which is going to run through September of this year. So she has a very strong institutional and academic backing. So I'm really curious how this work does within that background. Her market is predominantly in London, but she has a very strong presence in New York. Although a lot of her works are of grand scale, this composition is quite unique. Again, she had a very strong 2021 when she achieved her record for the secondary market, and it carried out through 2022 and this year as well. So really excited to see her work, and let's see how it does.
So those are our picks. Understand there are thousands of works coming to market in the next 3 weeks. And this is just a small insight into some of the works we believe in, but there are lots of other works that we support and that we're doing due diligence on presently. If you are looking to auction for acquisition, education is the key. We offer lots of educational webinars. Our next educational webinar for our collectors who work with us will be focused on Basquiat, looking at his influences and who he influenced. But we also offer lots of other webinars that we can provide, and lots of documentation. We do lots of reports. So you need to educate yourself. Make sure you look at those categories. Those categories are extremely important. While people call collecting art a passion asset, and while passion is extremely important, you can see how passionate all of our specialists are about the works that they're looking at, but you also need to use the other part of your brain, which is the rational part of your brain, and that requires due diligence. That requires you taking your time and making sure that you know what you're buying and you're paying the right price for it. So seek advice, whether it's a conservator or working with someone who's an art advisor specifically focused on that due diligence. We really do recommend that you do that, especially if you're paying above a certain threshold. Obviously, if you're not buying only for investment, and we do have clients that do buy just for investment, they don't hang them in their house. But if you're a collector investor, which I would call that, where you do want to look at the work every day, don't buy just for investment, right? This is something, it's like a marriage, right? You need to see it every day and you still want to love it, right? And when you're actually bidding, and we bid on behalf of our clients for this reason, auction is an emotional experience, and many of our clients get carried away, and it's very, very important that you have that discipline when buying at auction. With that, can you go to the next slide, Elizabeth? We want to thank everyone for attending today's seminar. We will have our entire global team in New York, pretty much. Our entire global team will be in New York, and many of our experts are there already working with clients. And obviously, if you have any questions, if you want to reach out to discuss a specific work, understand that the work we do, this is just touches the surface of what we do for our clients when we're looking at a piece. We do all the due diligence, examine all the categories of analysis, determine the pricing, and then decide with the client whether or not to move forward. So feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions whatsoever, and we may see you at the auctions. And thanks again for today, and have a wonderful day.